Obstructed justice, a report in the Washington Post. This comes as CNN has also learned that Mueller is asking witnesses about denials made by outgoing communications director Hope Hicks. CNN's Jessica Schneider joins me now. And Jessica, this all centers around Hicks claiming that there were no known contacts between the Trump campaign and any Russians.
Right, and those were the comments she made just 2 days after the election. It was Hope Hicks, in her role with the transition at that time, where she told the New York Times no one on the campaign had met with any foreign entity. But of course, as we now know, numerous people associated with the campaign met with numerous Russian officials and Russian nationals throughout the campaign. So now Hope Hicks's comments, they're getting a closer look by the special counsel.
Tonight, Hope Hicks may be on her way out of the White House, but she is still under scrutiny in the special counsel's Russia investigation.
It's not ending anytime soon. That's one thing we know for certain.
2 days after the 2016 election, Hicks told the New York Times no one on the campaign had any contact with Russian officials. She said, "We are not aware of any campaign representatives that were in touch with any foreign entities before yesterday when Mr. Trump spoke with many world leaders." A former Trump campaign aide tells CNN Mueller's team has asked about this comment in interviews, specifically if it was accurate given the numerous contacts with Russians that have since come to light, and whether Hicks was aware of any of those contacts when she made the denial. The list of Russian meetings that took place during the campaign and were disclosed over the past year or more includes that Trump Tower meeting with the Russian lawyer in June 2016, attended by Donald Trump Jr., Paul Manafort, and Jared Kushner, Jeff Sessions' meeting with then Russian Ambassador Sergei Kislyak at the Republican National Convention in July 2016, when Sessions was still a senator but a top surrogate of the Trump campaign. Trump campaign advisors meeting with Kislyak at the RNC, an additional Sessions meeting with Kislyak in his Senate office in September 2016, and George Papadopoulos' series of meetings, phone calls, and emails with Russians and people connected to the Kremlin during the campaign. Hicks denied knowing about the Trump Tower meeting during her House Intelligence interview this week, according to a source. Meanwhile, the Washington Post reports Mueller's team has been investigating the period of time last summer when the president seemed determined to fire Attorney General Jeff Sessions. The president, livid at Sessions for recusing himself from the Russia investigation, repeatedly unleashes his fury at him on Twitter. Legal experts say it could play into the obstruction of justice piece of the Russia probe.
If his venting is toward a corrupt purpose of eliminating an investigator, firing an attorney general, sending out a false narrative, that speaks more to corruption of intent, and that is what is under Mueller's inquiry.
And this questioning about Jeff Sessions has gone on for the past few months, according to the Post. Mueller's team has asked witnesses about the president's private comments about the attorney general and the president's state of mind in late July and early August of last year, when the president, of course, furiously belittled Jeff Sessions on Twitter. And of course, Jake, it's the exact same belittling we saw over Twitter yesterday when Jeff Sessions actually did push back in that statement.
He did. All right, Jessica Schneider, thanks so much. You spent 5 hours with Hope Hicks. Welcome back. Sticking with the politics lead now, a former Trump campaign aide telling CNN that investigators for special counsel Robert Mueller asked him about Hope Hicks's claims that there were zero contacts between the Trump campaign and Russian operatives. Claims made just 2 days after the 2016 election, claims that obviously were false. Joining me now is Democratic Congressman Mike Quigley of Illinois. He serves on the House Intelligence Committee. Congressman, thanks for joining us. Your committee questioned Hope Hicks on Tuesday. Sources say during that meeting, those questions, she admitted telling, quote, white lies on behalf of the president, refused to answer questions about her time inside the White House. I know you were there for about 5 hours of the 9-hour testimony. Was she asked about that denial she made?
Oh, I think the 9 hours she got asked just about everything, including that. What's most disturbing is the fact is she wasn't able to answer because of the gag order questions involving the most critical time in her involvement with the Trump associates.
Yesterday, she announced she's leaving the White House in the coming weeks. Did you have any inkling that this was coming? Do you think it has something to do with the Russia investigation?
No inkling at all. I thought she was calm, composed, extraordinarily well prepared. I've heard rumblings that the president said something like, "How could you be so stupid?" I think she was anything but stupid. She was extraordinarily ready for that interview yesterday. And aside from the fact that she couldn't talk about certain things in time frames because of the gag order, I had a hard time believing that she wasn't forthcoming about the other periods.
In terms of the comments you made about telling white lies on behalf of the president, there's obviously a big difference between telling somebody who's on the phone he's in a meeting, he can't talk to you, which is a white lie that I think nobody would really object to, and lying to the public, lying to a reporter about something of consequence. Did she mean one or the other in particular?
You know, it's hard to tell. If we're not allowed to push a witness to answer questions about all time frames, it's extraordinarily difficult to know. You know, it's deep within her own mind what she really meant, how much she was willing to protect the president. It's clear to me in watching witnesses, perhaps now over 60 in over a year's period, those close to the president were willing to do just about anything to defend him. So I suppose if we're lucky, we'll get her back under subpoena under this time frame, and we'll find out more. But right now, we've been stalled and stymied on this investigation because my Republican friends are willing to let the White House install a gag order on our key witnesses.
Well, speaking of your Republican friends, take a listen to your colleague, Republican Congressman Tom Rooney, who's also on the House Intelligence Committee.
We need to end this investigation. It's been going on for a year. We've interviewed scores of witnesses, and now we've gotten to the point now where we're literally bringing people in for 9 hours just so the Democrats can leak to the press something as ridiculous as white lies.
How do you respond, sir?
Yeah, I mean, let's put aside yesterday's testimony because in the grand scheme of things, it's not that critical. We have not even touched on money laundering, right? Deutsche Bank is fined $610 million for helping the Russians launder money. And who was the Trump financial world financing? Trump Associates. It came from Deutsche Bank. We haven't talked about Peter Smith. We've let people like Sessions, Trump Jr., Lewandowski, and Bannon not answer critical questions. So sure, it's taken a year. A lot of that's because we've wasted time on the memo. And we've let the White House dictate how we're going to move forward on the investigation. If they're serious about this, let Mr. Nunez stand aside. I don't think this is on Mr. Rooney. I think it's on the Speaker of the House for letting them do this. And he is complicit as anyone in stalling this investigation and, frankly, obstructing it.
The White House has not implemented the sanctions that Congress overwhelmingly passed against Russia for election interference. Do you think that that is relevant to the Russia investigation?
It's extraordinary that no one in the White House, no one in the majority, in the House and Senate, hasn't spoken out about this. Any other law that we pass so overwhelmingly that the executive branch says, hey, we're not going to enforce this, it's just beyond comprehension. And the fact of the matter is, the White House has said, and the President has said, there's nothing to this, but he's certainly acting when he does this and he doesn't implement this law like the Russians have something on him.
Congressman Mike Quigley, thanks so much for your time. Appreciate it, sir.
Thank you.
Did the Attorney General just double dog dare President Trump to fire him? How much more can Trump's feud with Jeff Sessions escalate? That's next. The nickname President Trump has given to his Attorney General. We're back with our politics lead. A source tells CNN that behind the scenes, President Trump is fuming and indignant after Attorney General Sessions responded to the president's Twitter attack with acts of defiance, practically daring the president to fire him in a statement he put out defending his priorities. And Sessions was later seen dining in the company of Rod Rosenstein, another of the president's frequent targets, and the Justice Department official supervising the Russia probe after Sessions recused himself. The president's attacks had already prompted Justice Department staffers to give their boss a bulletproof vest as a tongue-in-cheek gag gift. My panel is back with me. Mr. Agu, that's not a particularly nice thing to say about your Attorney General.
It's
and
not.
Guess what? You can get rid of him.
Yeah, but he would risk more if he did. And good for A.G. Sessions for standing up. You know, he was one of the, I think he was the first Republican senator to endorse him, and this is how he repays him. There's one thing to be disappointed in somebody who works for you. There's another thing to malign them. And publicly, you have those kind of conversations behind closed doors, not through tweets to the entire world.
Sessions used to be the senator from Alabama. His former colleague in the Senate, Richard Shelby, said that if he were Sessions, he would not stand for such treatment. Take a listen.
Does the president want to
because the president's saying you don't have any confidence in me.
So that is Jeff's challenge right now, and what he wants to do and how he does it. And he's a good man. He's going through a lot. He's got a lot of challenges.
Sorry, a little problem with the audio there, but you hear Senator Shelby saying that he wouldn't stand for it. What do you think?
I think it's hard to overstate just how badly broken the relationship between Donald Trump and Jeff Sessions is, to where the president publicly lambasts him all the time. And Jeff Sessions finally, after him calling him weak, very weak, saying he regretted picking him, that he was disappointed in him, finally pushed back on that in that statement, which wasn't even that forceful, but it was very pointed and directed at the president. The president did not like that statement, but it just is very telling to see what this relationship is like between these two men. And this has been going on for nearly a year now. It was last March that Jeff Sessions recused himself from overseeing the Russia investigation, which is what has infuriated the president and really taken over his mind. And he's never gotten over it. He may publicly not mention it for a few weeks, or it might be off of his mind, but it always comes back to this recusal, and it's just hard to overstate just how much these men dislike each other. When they're in meetings together at the White House, as they were just 2 weeks ago, welcoming Medal of Valor recipients in the Oval Office, taking photos with them, Jeff Sessions and Donald Trump barely interacted. So it's hard to overstate just how badly broken this relationship is. But the next question is, where does it go from here? And no one knows. The White House staffers don't understand why the president won't just fire him if he's this tired of him. People at the DOJ don't think that Jeff Sessions is going to quit anytime soon. He seems to be digging his heels in. So we're just going to continue this saga of them publicly criticizing each other, but not saying anything to each other directly.
Where does it go from here? The Sarah Sanders clip that we showed there accidentally, it was a reporter saying, does the president want to get rid of this attorney general? And Sanders says, not that I know of. What is that? that's not
probably an honest answer.
Right, I know. Do you want to get rid of your babysitter? Not that I know of.
Not that I know of.
Yeah, I mean, but it's not. It's an honest answer, fine. Well, first of all, it's not an honest answer because she probably has some idea. She knows something. But more importantly, that's not what you say about your attorney general. You say, no, the appropriate thing you're supposed to say is, no, he has the complete confidence of the president, or you get rid of him.
Yeah, look, the president is never going to see it this way, but the reality is the attorney general is protecting him from himself. The only way that they are truly going to get beyond this Russia investigation is if the Department of Justice can function independently from the West Wing, make an independent evaluation based on facts, and provide recommendations that either clear his name and clear their administration or not. And the idea that this is somehow directed or in any way influenced by the West Wing is how we found ourselves in this problem in the first place. So, look, the president, again, is not going to see it this way, but what Attorney General Sessions did yesterday by pushing back is the absolute best thing that he could do for this administration.
And it's why you have Nina Turner, the new president of the Jeff Sessions fan club, which
just on the issue of him standing up for himself.
But also, but Josh's point is a cogent one, because the truth is everything that the president has been mad at him for doing is him being ethical,
right?
Him recusing himself, him saying, no, I'm going to have the inspector general inspect this, look into this.
Doing things the proper way.
Right, exactly.
And not the Trump way, which is just do what I say, how I say do it, when I say do it. Forget the consequences. Just do what I say. And so, just on him standing up for himself his policies I don't agree with at all. But good for the AG for standing up.
There's one other interesting thing. Jerry Falwell Jr., who is a big supporter of the president's, piled on Twitter and wrote this after the president badmouthed Sessions. Jerry Falwell Jr. wrote, "I couldn't agree more. U.S. Attorney General Sessions must be part of the Bush-Romney-McCain Republican establishment. He probably supported real Donald Trump early in campaign to hide who he really is. Or he could just be a coward." What?
I don't often do a double take on Twitter, but I read that and I was like, what?
Is this a parody account?
Yeah.
It was laughable. That's like, it takes a lot for people in Washington to defend someone like Jeff Sessions, but that tweet had everyone being like, what are you talking about?
But what do you think? What goes through your mind as somebody, you're a very serious conservative. You're part of the conservative establishment in this town, and I don't mean that in a pejorative sense at all. Right. When you see Jerry Falwell Jr. start to float these conspiracy theories that he only supported Donald Trump to hide who he what does that even mean? Well, how would that work?
That's a really good question. How would that work? I felt like I missed a chapter, right? All of a sudden it's like, wait, fall well? Is that this is where we went here? It's like InfoWars, right?
Yes.
No, I mean, I don't know. Clearly, it's out of place, and I think that is a sentiment that is not shared widely anywhere.
And Jeff Sessions is one of the few people in the president's cabinet that is actually carrying out the agenda that he said he was going to enact if he got into the White House.
irony.
So that is where saying that he was hiding who he really is. Jeff Sessions is doing exactly what we thought he would do if he became Attorney General as the Attorney General.
And the statement that you were referring to that Sessions put out that is pointed if you speak Washingtonese, he says, as long as I am the Attorney General, I will continue to discharge my duties with integrity and honor, and this department will continue to do its work in a fair and impartial manner according to the law and Constitution. What he's saying there is, as long as I am Attorney General, meaning go ahead and fire me, big boy, if you want to, I am going to do the ethical thing.
That's right.
Right?
He's saying this is how I roll, Mr. President. So, you know, come on, bring it. He's saying bring it to the president. That's what he's saying.
But it's almost like a dare to fire him.
No.
Yeah, I mean, look, he's been down this road so many times over the last year and a half. How else is he supposed to handle it? He's turned the other cheek. He's provided information that would be counter to what the president is claiming. He's handled it in every way you possibly can. He's now gotten to the point where he's basically saying, this is the way I roll.
Well, and staying on in the job is a dare to fire him, because it's very clear from the president's tweets and many, many criticisms of Jeff Sessions that he wants him to quit. He doesn't want to have to fire him. So Jeff Sessions even just remaining on and not quitting is essentially a dare.
It's defiant in itself. And your point, Josh, is a great one, which is he is protecting him from himself.
Absolutely. And a number of senators and congressmen on the Hill are begging him to stay right where he's at.
Thanks so much, everyone. Stick around. How hard is it to confiscate guns? The Dow. Trump announces new policy that some fear could spark a trade war and mean higher prices for everything from your car to your washer-dryer, even to your beer. The White House in total chaos and morale reportedly at an all-time low. Could new questions about potential conflicts of interest be the end of Jared Kushner's career in the Oval Office? The shocking new report that his family business got $500 million in loans amidst multiple meetings at the White House. Plus, a statement that's pretty much a dare, plus a defiant dinner and a bulletproof vest. And now a president fuming at his handpicked attorney general. Who will win the battle between Jeff Sessions and President Trump? Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to The Lead. I'm Jake Tapper. A chaotic week for the Trump administration, struggling with one crisis after another, including right now as the Dow just closed down more than 400 points after President Trump announced this afternoon his intention to impose new tariffs on steel and aluminum. It had been down more than 500 points earlier. The tariffs raising concern about a possible trade war. This comes as the White House grapples with another bombshell report involving presidential son-in-law and senior advisor Jared Kushner. The New York Times revealing the Kushner family business received loans from companies totaling $500 million amidst Kushner in his capacity as a White House official meeting with the heads of those companies. Joshua Harris, the founder of Apollo Global Management, met with Kushner on multiple occasions beginning in early 2017, three sources told the New York Times. Those sources tell the Times he was advising the administration. According to a CNN source familiar with those conversations, he was also talking about a possible role with the White House. That was discussed, though it never materialized. In November 2017, after all these meetings, Kushner Companies was given a $184 million loan by Apollo Global Management. That loan is 3 times the size of their average property loan, according to the Times. In addition, Citigroup lent Kushner Companies and one of its partners $325 million for a different project, a loan made last spring, after which Kushner met with Citigroup chief executive Michael Corbat. A spokesman for Apollo said the loan went through the standard approval process. Citigroup says its CEO was not involved in the transaction and never discussed it with Jared Kushner. A spokesman for Kushner's attorney told CNN, quote, Mr. Kushner has met with hundreds of business people during the campaign transition and in the administration to hear ideas about improving the American economy. He has had no role in the Kushner Companies since joining the government and has taken no part of any business, loans, or projects with or for the companies after that. We should note Kushner remains part owner of the company that got the loan from Apollo after he met with the head of Apollo in his official White House capacity, and Jared Kushner owns a stake in the entity that got the loan from Citigroup, after which he met with the CEO of Citigroup in his capacity as a White House official. Now, this report is just the latest calling into question Kushner's ability to function in his position as senior advisor. But sources tell CNN Kushner is planning to stay, and the White House reaffirmed that the president wants him to. Well, let's go now to CNN's Pamela Brown. Pamela, we've seen many tumultuous weeks at this White House. Is there any sense among allies of President Trump that this time all the tumult, everything going on with Jeff Sessions, with the market today, with Jared Kushner, with Hope Hicks, that it's different in any way?
Yeah, it certainly seems like it's one thing after another just in the last couple of days, Jake. And there is a sense in the White House that the morale has plummeted. And it feels to some staffers who we've spoken to who are used to the chaos, mind you, that things seem to be in a downward spiral. Even with today's tariff announcement, Jake, sources say many White House staffers were left in the dark on what is a major trade decision that has already caused the stock market to go down in reaction. But today, White House Press Secretary Sarah Sanders downplayed there was any chaos surrounding that announcement and beyond.
President Trump announcing plans to impose tariffs on steel and aluminum next week, a move that could spark a trade war.
Workers in our country have not been properly represented. So we're going to build our steel industry back, and we're going to build our aluminum industry back.
The president outlined the tariffs, 20% on steel and 10% on aluminum, during hastily arranged comments at the White House. The move, aimed at fulfilling a longtime campaign promise, comes a day after the White House announced the pending resignation of one of the president's longest-serving and closest advisors, Communications Director Hope Hicks.
She used to be in my real estate company. I said, "What do you know about politics?" She said, "Absolutely nothing." I say, "Congratulations, you're into the world of politics," right?
Hicks' departure adding to the chaos in the West Wing, with sources describing sinking morale among staffers. Amid the turmoil, White House Chief of Staff John Kelly cracking a joke about his job in the White House at an event with current and former heads of the Department of Homeland Security.
One of the great honors of my life, being the Secretary of Homeland Security. But I did something wrong, and God punished me, I guess.
Kelly's crackdown on interim security clearances leading to the loss of top-secret clearance for Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, along with dozens of other White House officials. The move adding to tensions in the West Wing and raising questions from those outside the White House about Kushner's role.
I don't think he should have been there to begin with, especially with the portfolio that he had. What I'm worried about right now in the White House is the revolving door. It's spinning like a top.
Look, Jared's still a valued member of the administration, and he's going to continue to focus on the work that he's been doing.
Kushner is also facing fresh scrutiny over a report in the New York Times that his family business has received $500 million in loans from companies whose executives he met with at the White House. A spokesman for Kushner's attorney tells CNN that Kushner has met with hundreds of business people, but has had no role in the family's company since joining the government. Even though Kushner stepped down as chief executive of the company, he still retains a stake in many Kushner company holdings, according to his financial disclosure.
And Kushner's spokesperson says Kushner has had no role in Kushner Company since joining the government. Now, Sarah Sanders, you heard there, said during that press briefing today that the president does not want to fire Kushner and that he will continue in his current role. But Sanders' answer on Attorney General Jeff Sessions was far from certain, Jake. In response to a question about whether the president wants to get rid of Sessions, she would only say, "Not that I know of." Jake.
Not that I know of. Pamela Brown. Thank you. My panel joins me now. So much to discuss, but let's start with the idea of Jared Kushner in his official capacity in the White House, meeting with individuals, CEOs, and loans coming either immediately before or after those meetings. This is why people, even if it's completely innocent, this is why people, Caitlin, sell, divest, get rid of their financial holdings before they go into the White House. So that there aren't questions.
Yeah, this is precisely why. This is just another addition to a string of stories that question his ability to be able to work in the West Wing and whether or not he has these outside ventures that are complicating his role. And the press secretary today at the briefing referred questions about this to his personal attorney, Abby Lowell, which just blows my mind because this is a senior advisor to the president meeting with these executives in the White House, and then his family's real estate company is benefiting from it to the tune of millions of dollars in loans. and the press secretary can't answer questions. He's a White House employee. He doesn't take a paycheck, but he certainly flies around on taxpayer-funded airplanes and benefits from the likes of working in this very high-ranking position in the White House. And the White House press secretary can't even answer questions on this. She's referring it to his outside attorney, which just is striking to me.
Odd. And Josh, there is a national security component to this. The Washington Post reported yesterday that, according to individuals who have seen the intelligence reports, there are individuals in at least 4 countries, China, the UAE, Israel, and Mexico, who have expressed the belief that they could manipulate Kushner based on financial problems that his companies are having, his naivete, and also just the complicated web of all his financial holdings. Again, we don't know that that's happened, but this is why people sell all their stuff before getting into these powerful positions.
Well, I mean, you hit the nail on the head. I mean, that's exactly why the process is in place for most people who become staff or in any sort of senior administration or even congressional position. You ultimately want to divest yourself of any appearance of a conflict. And what they've done here, obviously, is put themselves in the administration in a difficult spot because you have 2 fact patterns, right? You've got the loans and then you've got the meetings. Now, I've met Josh Harris. I find it extremely hard to believe that he would put a company that he has basically built in jeopardy for a White House job, as has been suggested. That didn't happen. But we do have an appearance problem here that obviously the White House needs to deal with and Jared needs to deal with.
And what seems to be going on here, I mean, it just boggles the mind for people who have been following politics for, I mean, Jimmy Carter had to sell his peanut farm. Right. He had to sell his peanut farm before becoming the president. The idea that the rules don't apply.
My have times changed, and we talk about guilt by association. Well, this is influence by association. Even if he's not running the day-to-day, there is a connection between what these bankers have done to give his family loans and his influence in the White House. And I'm not so sure. I think if he really cared about this administration in the country, the best thing to do is to, go beyond. I mean, just put away the appearance of impropriety and just leave.
And this all comes, of course, in the midst of a ton of turbulence. Hope Hicks, the latest member of the West Wing, to head for the door. I want you to take a look at this photograph. This is the swearing in of senior staff shortly after the inauguration. And look at all those names who have disappeared. Omarosa, Hope Hicks, Rob Porter, Katie Walsh, Michael Flynn, Sean Spicer, Ryan Priebus, Steve Bannon, probably some others there that we can't see. Is this week, Caitlin, I mean, I know that it's been chaotic. This is your first White House you've covered, so I have to say, I don't mean to sound patronizing, but it's normally not like this. It's normally
not set pretty high.
It's normally not this crazy. But is this week even particularly crazy amidst this chaos?
Certainly. There is certainly that feeling in the White House, even among White House staffers. They were texting me about that Kushner story saying, I can't even believe this. This is really ludicrous. So it's not just, this isn't just a normal week. That is often a running joke around the White House press corps that every day is insane. But this week has been especially a flurry of stories. Hope Hicks was a really big, significant story yesterday that really took a lot of people by surprise, not just those of us who cover the White House, but also people inside the White House. The very senior staffers were very surprised. Though they knew that she was contemplating it, leaving at some point, no one imagined that she would be there forever. A lot of staffers don't imagine they'll be there for forever, but it was still very, very surprising. And what's going to be interesting to see is how it affects the president day to day, because he can lose staffers like Ryan Priebus and Sean Spicer and these other staffers, and it doesn't affect him on a daily level. But Hope Hicks is someone who didn't even leave the West Wing typically on a daily basis, because the president could summon her at any moment from the Oval Office with a, hey, Hope, get in here, so they could talk about whatever was on his mind. So it certainly is something very significant that it's going to affect him out of all the stories we've had this week.
Take a listen to Anthony Scaramucci on CNN this morning about the culture inside the White House.
I think it's the chief of staff. I think there's a culture of fear inside the White House, and people are afraid to talk to each other. The morale's terrible. And the reason why the morale's terrible is that the rule by fear and intimidation does not work in a civilian environment. But I predict more departures.
He also said to Bloomberg News, quote, does the president want to lose everyone because of General Jackass, a reference to General Kelly? That's his words, not mine. And we should point out General Kelly fired Scaramucci. What do you make of all that?
Yeah, the mooch, back in action, right? Why not? Let's get a little bit more of him on cable TV. He was there for a cup of coffee. He must be an expert. Look, I think he has absolutely no idea what he's talking about in terms of the fitness that General Kelly may or may not have with respect to being the chief of staff there. He clearly doesn't have any. That's part of the reason why he's showing up, because he doesn't have access to this administration, so he's irritated about it. But look, I mean, personnel issues are real, and they're difficult. And you mentioned in particular, Caitlin, with Hope, she was very, very close to the president, obviously one of the few people who had the capability of influencing him on a day-to-day basis. And that's difficult for any principal or any president to take. So they'll have to, no staff is totally irreplaceable, but it's going to take some work.
Everyone stick around. What Hope Hicks said that's now caught the attention of special counsel Robert Mueller. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
The Lead with Jake Tapper